everyone, welcome to another edition of Think Your Way to an Epic Life. And my next guest, Frank King, is the mental health comedian. He has 12 TED Talks. He's working on his 13th right now. And what makes him so valuable, especially this time of the year, we're here among the holidays, is suicide is through the roof, guys. It is such a big deal. And in here, he tells us if at these family gatherings that you're around, you think someone might be, he tells you how to talk to them and what to say and how to get them help. And it's a really powerful, powerful podcast. I hope you enjoyed as much as I did. So, Frank, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, you and I both know, the audience doesn't know, it was part of a plea bargain. So I'm not really here of my own accord. Kidding.
Okay, I've never had a guest take my words away right off of the thing like that. Here we go. That's what you get when you invite a comedian who talks about suicide. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I began my comedy career in fourth grade. I told a joke. The kids laughed. The teacher was hysterical. She had to excuse herself to go to the teacher's lounge. She was laughing so hard. So I thought, at that moment, I'm going to be a comedian. And 12th grade did the 12th grade talent show. Nobody had ever done stand-up before, and I won. Of course, I beat the accordion player and the folk dancers. Not a tough victory, but still a victory. Said to my mama, I'm going to LA to be a comedian. My mother, big on education, said, no, son, you're going to college first. I don't care what you do when you get done. You can be a goat herder for all I care, but you're going to be a goat herder with a college degree. So I picked up a couple of liberal arts degrees, which never hurt anybody, and then headed out for the West Coast. Did my first open mic night on April Fool's Day, 1984. Halfway through my 5-minute set, I heard a voice inside my head that said, you're home. Did club comedy 2,629 nights in a row, nonstop.
I'm sorry. Can you repeat that number?
2,629 nights in a row, 7 years and change. With my girlfriend, who quickly became my wife. She came along for the ride. Opened up for Seinfeld, Ellen, Rosie, Steve Harvey, Foxworthy, so forth and so on. And then after, I guess, about 10 years in, I got a job in radio. So I came off the road. I took a number one morning show in the market, drove it to number 6 in 18 months. Friend of mine said, you didn't drive in the ground, you drove that in the middle earth. True. And then when I got done with that, the comedy club boom had busted. So I made the jump to corporate comedy. After dinner, after lunch, the rubber chicken circuit. Some of my purist comedian friends, you went corporate, you sold out. Yeah, I'm a prostitute, but I'm a high price prostitute. Because a good comic on an average night make $400 or $500. A good corporate comic average night, $5,000. I'm no math major. Did that for 10 years until the last recession, and business dropped off 80% practically overnight. We lost everything in a Chapter 7 bankruptcy, and that's when I learned what the barrel of my gun tasted like, literally. Spoiler alert, I did not pull the trigger. A friend of mine came to a keynote recently. He'd never heard me say that sentence, I did not pull the trigger. He came up afterwards, and I quote, hey, man, how come you didn't pull the trigger? I said, hey, man, could you try to sound slightly less disappointed? That's where the humor is in the topic, by the way, funny personal anecdotes. And after speaking came back, after the recession, meeting planner said to me, Frank, look, we love you. We just can't pay you $5,000 anymore just to be funny. You've got to teach the audience something. Okay. And I'd always wanted to do that. Always wanted to make a living and a difference. Had no idea how. So a friend of mine is named Judy Carter, Carter. She wrote a book called The Message of You, Turning Your Life into a Money-Making Speaking Career. She gave me a copy, said, Frank, read it, you'll figure it out. And sure enough, halfway through, I thought, oh, my Lord, I know what I'm going to teach because I have 2 mental illnesses. I came very close to suicide, and there are more nuts in my family than in a squirrel turd. I realized I could keynote on suicide prevention. Now, first hurdle, I've been a comic for 2.5 decades. Who's going to take me serious? So my wife said, do a TEDx. And I said, what's a TEDx? And I happened to get an email invite from a TEDx in Vancouver, British Columbia that week. invite to apply.
Oh, come on. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. The week she said to you should do a TEDx, you just so happened to get people don't get invitations very much. They try to get on.
Well, and
This is an interesting story.
Well, it was an invitation to apply. Hang on, I got to pick up a cat. It was an invitation to apply, not to do it. Yeah, invitations are rare, but I'll tell you. I'll tell you the two I got here in a second. Three I got. So I applied, and I knew my audition piece would be better live than on Zoom. So I flew up from Eugene, Oregon, to British Columbia, and I did my 5-minute audition live, and it worked. I got my first. It didn't even fit the theme of the TEDx. They just liked and then 2 TEDx events after that contacted me. Do you have any more mental health topics? Oh yeah. So I've been invited to 2, actually 3. Later on, TEDx number 9, I think I got a DM on LinkedIn from a TEDx in the state of Assam in India, and they said, we love your take on mental health. Nobody here talks about it that way. Would you do a virtual? So I've been invited to 3 of the 12. The rest of them I applied for. A couple of them I didn't have to audition because, and I tell my TEDx coaching students this, you need a hook. Title, subtitle, whatever it is, got to get their attention, got to slow the scroll, got to make them go, oh yeah, we need some of that. My 5th TEDx talk, the second one I got with no audition, was mental health and the orgasm. Treat your depression single-handedly. And yeah, I love my iPhone, but it's my second favorite handheld device. And they said, no, dude, you don't have to audition. Just come over here and do that. So I got it without the audition, which is rare as well. And now I speak on suicide prevention as a workplace health and safety priority. And what I recommend to the speakers I coach, pick a lane to speak, which is a Jane Atkinson Wealthy Speaker Coach line. My lane is suicide prevention. Then find the people who have that problem and are willing to pay you. And I recommend 3 to 6 industries that have that issue. And I pick 6 industries. That's the only people I market to. I don't spray and pray. I just market directly at them. And then figure out what associations they belong to, because associations have to have a conference every year. People pay to come. They got money to pay you. And here's the bonus. Everybody in the audience at a conference has the same problem. So you can get spin-off bookings, coaching, training, consulting from the audience. So you're showcasing and getting paid for it. That's sort of my formula for speakers, to make money speaking. That's how we got here today.
My goodness. My goodness. Okay. So you start off, have you thanked your wife lately?
Oh, she has. There have been times when I didn't believe in myself. I was going to quit. I'm going to get a job. No, you're not. You're going to follow your gift. I mean, she stayed with me through those and through the bankruptcy. I mean, we lost everything. I mean, we did have a little house that she grew up in that we had as a rental. So we did have some place to go, which many people didn't have. So, but that's basically, we had 2 cars, a bunch of animals, and a place to go. Couldn't even afford a subscription to the newspaper. A friend of ours gave us a subscription to the newspaper. And the day that first edition arrived, I cried. Because we couldn't afford. That's how broke we were. So,
wow! And then look at you now.
I know.
So and guys, everybody, my audience knows that I'm a coach. To have a coach that's that passionate, and Ed Milet, I love this line he uses all the time. It's not original to him, but he uses it all the time. The person you can help is the person you used to be, and. Yeah. So you do talk about your coaching, just kind of an overview. What all do you coach people
on? 2-part program. One is called TEDx Launchpad, and it's 10-hour self-paced. I have videos. How do you find the application? How do you fill out the application? How do you figure out what your hook is? And then a second program called 6-Figure Speaker. Now you got your TEDx, and most people stop right there, figuring if it goes up on YouTube, the world's going to beat a path to their door. Not so. You have to leverage it to build your brand, raise your fee, up your number of speaking gigs. So the 6-Figure Speaker is, how do you get booked to speak at associations for $5,000 or better plus travel? So those are the 2 things then they go together nicely, because most TEDx coaches stop when they get the TEDx, and you're on your own for leveraging. We figured, well, why leave them right there? Why not help them, build a speaking career based on TEDx is just a great credibility um, piece.
Sure. Sure. Okay. All right. So if someone wants to get a TEDx, they can coach with you. Do you do any mental health coaching?
No. However, when I speak, I put my cell phone number up on the screen in PowerPoint. And I say, if you're suicidal, call 988. If you're just having a bad day, call a crazy person. Here's my cell.
Wow. And how often do people take you up on that, Frank?
Once every couple of weeks, somebody will call or they'll text. I did 7 keynotes in 2 days in New York City on site at a construction site. And at the end, I do general Q&A. And before I do that, I say to the crowd, look, if you have a question you want to ask, story you want to tell, don't want to tell everybody, I'll hang out another 30, 45 minutes. Well, the next morning I'll wake up. I've got a text. It's a New York number. Don't recognize it. And it simply said, can I get that phone number again for the suicide prevention hotline? So the person didn't want to ask in front of everybody, didn't want to be seen in line, but texted me, and I cried. And part of the problem with construction, 1,000 people died last year by accident in construction. 6,000 died by suicide. You're 6 times more likely to jump off the building than fall off. In part because it's mostly men, and 8 out of 10 suicides nowadays in the U.S. are men.
Really?
Yes, toxic masculinity has a lot to do with it. As men tend not to reach out for help, suffer alone because they're men. They shouldn't. They should be able to muddle through it. And so yeah, it's that's why male heavy occupations, construction, agriculture, so forth and so on, logging or forestry, fishing, all have high rates of suicide. In part because it's men.
I'll be darned. Wow. So technically, you guys really do need us.
Yeah. Well, and we sell more. I co-wrote 4 books on men's mental health with 2 women. One of the women is a therapist. She teaches suicide prevention to first responders. And she wanted to buy a book on men's mental health for one of the guys. And she went to Barnes & Noble, brick and mortar store, nothing. Amazon, nothing. She thought, well, there's a vacuum. So she and a psychologist named Dr. Sally Spencer Thomas called me, because Sally knew me, and said, would you make our book funny? And I said, wait a minute. You 2 ladies are doing a book on men's mental health. Don't you think you might need a co-author who is, I don't know, a man? A man. So I said, look, make me a co-author. Let me voice it for Audible. I'll make it funny. But one book, we figured if we could get 12 guys, because it's an anthology, if we get 12 guys to come forward and be honest about their problems and then tell us how they're coping, because men take advice from men. We figured if we get a dozen, we'd be lucky. We got 60 guys. So it ended up being 4 books on men's mental health. And again, 12 guys each book. Each one has a different issue. Each one tells us how they're coping, because again, men tend to take advice from men.
And I want to tell my audience, guys, because you're watching this podcast, you can get the first of those 4 books for free. And
What?
Yeah, for real. I'm serious. Like you don't have to pay or nothing. Just click the link below and check that out.
Yeah, it's
so
me
cool.
voicing it. Actually, it's my narration.
How fun is that?
And more books sell to women than men. And we figure it's because women have a man in their life they would like to help, but just have no idea how. So it is truly a manual. There's exercises and suggestions and references and so forth.
And so I know this is a kind of a silly question, but if men don't want to go get help, how can their wives, without trying to sound like nagging, approach them with this?
I would go to your local chapter of NAMI, National Alliance Mental Illness, NAMI. There's a chapter in pretty much every county in the country. They have a 12-week program for family members of someone with a mental health issue. And it's just like there's a class with depression, class with schizoaffective, a class for, schizophrenia, 12 weeks. And they teach you as a family member what to say, what not to say, what to do, what not to do. And they also have family to family therapy. So, the other family members can go in and do family to family therapy. It makes you feel a little less alone knowing that other families living with somebody who has this issue and they're struggling. And here's the best part about NAMI, NAMI, everything they do is free.
Wow. Wow. Who knew that there were resources like that? Thank you so much. Thank you for
You're
what you
welcome.
do, Frank. I mean, what you're doing, you are making a powerful, positive difference. And so I want to go back to the real, you said it just like you've said it 100 times before that, you had to taste your 38. What was happening? Can you walk us through that?
Yes, I was. People ask me why didn't you pull the trigger, and I wish I had some romantic answer, but it's not romantic at all. People think when you're suicidal, you completely lost your mind. Often not true. My rational mind was still functioning. So I went to the barn with the gun, pulled the hammer back, put it in my mouth, see if I could do it. Someone once asked me, "What did it taste like?" I said, "In that moment, relief." Because suicide is most often not about wanting to kill yourself, but about ending the pain. So I sold insurance straight out of college. I knew that most life insurance policies had a 2-year suicide clause. The reason I was going to kill myself was to restore my wife financially because I had $1 million life insurance policy. So she'd be brokenhearted, but she'd not be broke anymore. So I called my agent. I said, "How long have I had the policy?" And he was well aware of my financial condition. I said, "How long have I had the policy?" He said, 22 months and don't do it. Because he had delivered checks in the past when the policy was fully in force. So I had to wait 2 months to kill myself. So my life insurance policy saved my life. The suicide clause saved my life because I couldn't leave her brokenhearted and broke. And in suicidality, there's something called burdensomeness. Oftentimes, people believe the world would be better off without them. Your family, your friends, the world. And I knew my wife would be better off without me financially. I was certainly worth more dead than alive. So it was that burdensomeness. I can fix this. But fortunately, I had to wait 2 months. And I wasn't marking days off the calendar, just can't wait. Fortunately, at the 2 month mark, I don't recall. I think things got a little better. Bankruptcy went through, phone call stopped. I was able to break the surface and take a deep breath. Still awful, but, not awful enough to pull the trigger.
Gosh. Isn't it kind of shocking how much more we learn and grow through our trials and tribulations than we do through our successes?
Well, my formula for speaker coaching formula is take your pain and turn it into passion, your passion into purpose, and your purpose into profit. Make a living and a difference.
Yeah, you will, because people really do think they are the only one.
Oh,
I'm
Lord.
the only one who has to live with blank, whatever blank is.
Well, and it goes even deeper than that for me. I have something called chronic suicidal ideation, along with major depressive disorder. And the story I tell the audience is chronic suicidal ideation, it's rare. I've said that out loud, chronic suicidal ideation, to therapists, and they stare at me like a pig staring at a wristwatch. They have no idea what I'm talking about. Uh, I say to the audience, here's kind of what it looks like. My car broke down a couple of years ago. I had 3 thoughts unbidden. 1, get it fixed. 2, buy a new. And 3, I could just kill myself. And the power of telling that story out loud is almost every time I've spoken since 2014, there's been somebody in the audience who has that. And they invariably don't know it has a name. They think they're just some kind of freak and completely alone. And I did it at college, and a young woman came up and said, "Thanks for the keynote." I said, "You're welcome." She goes, "But I got to tell you, it made me weep." How did it make you weep? She goes, "You know the story about the car? Get it fixed, buy a new one, kill yourself? I've been having those thoughts all my life. I thought it was just me. I thought I was some kind of freak. Then I hear you say that out loud, that you have that it's a thing, it has a name. And I realized for the first time in my life, I'm not, in fact, alone, and I wept." There's a little ROI for you.
No doubt. No doubt. It's the most important ROI of all of it.
Yeah.
Because it is so, so tragic for the people who are left behind.
Well,
And I'm sorry, go ahead.
and I must tell you, when I'm at a speaker networking event and we're going around the room, all right, now what I want to know is, what's the ROI for you speaking for your audience, your client? What's the ROI? And it's increased productivity, increased employee engagement, lower absenteeism. People don't kill themselves.
You win.
Jen.
Yeah, I know that. Trump. That's it.
Yep,
That's
exactly.
it. Oh my gosh, that is awesome. That is so awesome. So I know you have at least one. You probably have hundreds at this point, maybe thousands. One story that someone got to you, and I'm sure that there's hundreds of stories that you haven't heard. That one day somebody, I'm going to run into him, or I'm going to sit down, I'm going to write him a letter, and they haven't done it yet. But what's one story that you have heard about how what you're doing is impacting others?
Probably the most dramatic. I was speaking on site at a construction site in Cincinnati, and I had gotten the engagement because I had done an association event several months before, and this is a corporation that was in the audience. They hired me to come in and speak on site, and I did the keynote, and I said, we'll do some general Q&A, and then I'll hang out if you got an individual question or whatever. So there are 10 guys in line. Unusual because men don't generally come forward, but I'm another man. I've been vulnerable. I've shared my story. Last guy in line is an African American gentleman. I'm guessing mid-20s, crying so hard he can't speak. So I wait, and when he gathers himself, I said, "What's up?" He said, "I haven't slept in 2 nights. I work on the 5th floor of this building. I think about jumping off every day." I said, "Why is that?" He said, "Because I've lost 3 people close to me in the last year to violence, including my daughter who died in my arms. How'd you like somebody to pull the pin on that grenade drop in your lap?" So the guy that hired me was with HR. He was an HR guy, HR manager. And so I saw him and I waved him over. I said, "Look, you need to go find the EAP, Employee Assistance Program binder, find the closest mental health facility to where we're standing right now, take this nice young man by the hand and get him there now because he's circling the drain." A couple of months later, I had occasion to talk to the HR manager, and I'm terrified to ask. But I finally got up my courage. I go, "Hey, what happened to that nice young African American guy? Frank? He got evaluated. He got medicated. He's back on the job." That was probably the most dramatic. And I'm guessing his workmates had no idea he was suffering like that. Maybe some of his family wasn't aware. Maybe he never told anybody that story because oftentimes those stories begin with this: "Frank, I've never told anybody this." Really? I get that a lot.
Gosh, people so desperately need a safe place. They
Yeah.
need us.
My job is to give them, the theme of my speaking is start the conversation on suicide. That's my job, to give them permission to give voice to their feelings and experiences without recrimination. So they feel comfortable to come up and share with me, during Q&A sometimes and afterwards, almost always.
I'm blown away twice now on this podcast. You've had me speechless, and that just, you get an award. I haven't ever had that happen in hundreds of podcasts. So, your book, the giving away, the one that you're giving away, it's Guts, Grit, and the Grind, a mental mechanics manual.
Yeah.
Wow. That, and you're going to give this to our listeners. Tell us a little bit about it.
The book is, again, 12 stories, 12 guys. Each one has a separate issue. And the stories, first 500 words, life's good. Second 500 words, life went to hell in a handbasket. Third 500 words, here's how I'm coping. Plus, in amongst the stories are exercises, techniques, suggestions. So it truly is a manual. And it looks like an automobile owner's manual. We did it on purpose. Maybe guys would actually pick it up. And they asked me, the ladies did, also add the automobile metaphors, comparing the engine to the mind. My favorite is, don't you wish men had a check engine light on their brain? The light goes off. They go to the mental mechanic. The mental mechanic puts them up on the, on the lift and goes, "Bob, of course you're depressed. Dude, you're 2 quarts low on serotonin." So that's That's how he made it, funny, his metaphors. And then when you buy a car, you get AAA because at some point breakdown, tires are going to go flat. So when you have a mental health issue, you need to be prepared in that way. You need to have and you need to tell anyone you know, love, and trust what you're dealing with. It's like a pit crew at NASCAR. The driver doesn't hire the pit crew when he rolls into the pit. I mean, they're waiting. They're right there waiting with the tires and the oil and the gas. And so you need people who are there waiting in case it melts down for you.
Okay, so we're heading into the holiday season right now. Now, this podcast probably won't come out before it. I'm not sure, but we're into the holiday season, so people are seeing people they haven't seen in a long time. Guaranteed, some of those people are considering suicide, and some of them, like you said, are literally circling the drain.
Yeah.
How do you know that? What do you do? How do you help them?
Well, and the holidays are hard on people with everybody, not just people with mental illness. I mean, you're seeing people you don't see all the time. There's an expectation, it's the happiest time of the year. So you're forced to be happy. Uh, Signs of depression, not an exhaustive list, but my top three: eat too much, can't eat; sleep too much, can't sleep; have trouble getting out of bed in the morning. So they may be late for work or school frequently. However, they rally in the afternoon like they're a different person.
Can you say those three again? I'm sorry.
Yeah, they eat
a
too
lot
much.
of candy.
Yeah, eat too much or can't eat. Sleep too
Oh,
much.
can't eat. You didn't say candy. Okay, that's why I wanted you to repeat it. I was like, seriously? Yeah. Depressed people go for sugar?
Candy? Yeah. So eat too much or can't eat. Sleep too much or can't sleep. Have trouble getting out of the bed in the morning, so they're often late for work or school. But in the afternoon, they often rally like a whole different person. They let their personal hygiene go. So it used to be they were pretty well put together, but recently hair kind of dirty, clothes not so clean. It may be because they're having trouble getting out of bed in the morning to run a little wash, take a shower. So the question comes up: what do you say to somebody who's depressed? Well, let's start with what you don't say. People mean well, but they say things like, "Pull yourself up by your bootstraps." Yeah, which is difficult if you don't have any. Turn that frown upside down. My personal favorite: have you tried fish oil? At which point I go from suicidal to homicidal. Yeah. Now, what do you say? You say, I'm here for you and I mean it. I know you're not lazy or crazy or self absorbed. I know that depression is a mental illness. But with time and treatment, things will get better. I'll take the time, I'll help you get the treatment. And here's the really hard part: you have to ask them at that point, are you having thoughts of suicide? Just like that. If you can't ask that question, find somebody who can. And if you can't find anybody, call me and I'll ask them. Because, contrary to popular belief, saying suicide out loud in front of somebody who's depressed does not increase the chances they will do it. It actually decreases the chances they will do it. So let's say they don't admit they're suicidal, but your gut tells you. How would you know? Well, they talk about death and dying quite a bit. You catch them Googling death, dying, or how to die by suicide. Death and dying appears as a theme in their artwork, their music, their writing. They're getting their affairs in order, especially if they're giving away prized possessions, because they want to make sure the possessions go to the people they want them to go to when they're gone. And here's one that's counterintuitive and very dangerous. They've been depressed for a long time, and now they're happy for no apparent reason. And you're happy because they're happy. Well, they may be happy because they've chosen time, place, and method, and they know the pain is coming to an end. So what if they do tell you they're having thoughts of suicide? What do you say? You say, do you have a plan? And if they have a plan, what is your plan? And if it's detailed, time, place, and method, I'm going to the barn today with a gun and put it in my mouth. You need to get them to a mental health facility as quickly as possible, or at least get them on the phone with 988, the Suicide Prevention Lifeline text line. Now, this is something I never learned, never heard in any of the classes I've taken. What if they have a plan, but it's not particularly detailed? What in the world would you do? Well, psychiatrists and I got together and cobbled this up. I would say, okay, tell me, are you going to kill yourself? If they say no, okay, tell me why not. Make them give voice, because something is keeping them here. Kids, parents, religion, something. And then leverage that to keep them around for another day.
Wow. You know that all of that hit really, really close to home. I've got a dear friend whose husband was literally a rocket scientist. Very Christian family, owned their own home, didn't have financial problem, didn't. But all of a sudden, he just went off. Something happened, and he went off. And they worked with him and worked with him and worked with him and put him places and then worked with him. And the night before he did it, he cooked a wonderful dinner for his whole family. That next morning, he cooked breakfast for them and sent them off and told them, have a great day. And he was, and when they came home, he was no longer there.
Yep.
So, yeah. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Okay. So, how the heck do you turn this subject and get on stage and make people laugh?
Well, it's personal, funny anecdotes. In my first TEDx talk, I said to the audience, my first joke was not a joke, but a personal story. I said, I did some research. I went to TED.com to see how other people handled the topic of suicide, figuring there'd be 2, 3 dozen minimum talks out of the hundreds of thousands, and there were only 3. And then I said to the audience, well, duh. If you're really good at suicide, you're probably not going to be recording a TEDx talk.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, it's here's the thing about comedy. There's a rule in comedy. You can make fun of any group to which you belong.
Ah,
If I didn't have 2 mental illnesses, I hadn't come that close to suicide. I couldn't make that joke because it would just be in horrible taste. But because, I had a psychologist come up to me after our presentation and he said to me, he busted me. He goes, well, what qualifies you to speak on suicide prevention? You're not a psychologist, you're not a psychiatrist. And I said, because I can tell you what the barrel of my gun tastes like. And in the silence that followed, I said, look, Chief, I could go to college right now and learn everything you know. You will never know everything I know.
amen.
That's what qualifies me to talk on it.
That is so true. And that thinking is dwindling immensely. I'm working with an executive coach right now who has his PhD, and he said, I've got more paper than you could paper a wall with it. And he said, but that's not where I learned to do what I'm doing. It's once you get out of school that you start to study the things that you really want to, and the way you really learn. So, wow, Frank, this is a lot. Okay, so what um, what tips or tricks do you have for someone if they and they're not willing to go get help or anything, but they have maybe what you have, where they think I could go do this, or I could just kill myself.
Yes, well, I would say to them, I realized early on it's a coping mechanism. It's your brain saying, yeah, we could do this, we could do this. I got another suggestion, but you're not going to like it. Or you could do this, kill yourself. It's just a way that my brain works. It's not a serious thought. I had it so many times. So, but yeah, I would if you have an issue or you believe you have an issue, my advice is get a mental health evaluation. Find out if your depression is just garden variety or it's a depressive state of bipolar or what exactly is it? And then also get a physical examination because sometimes physical ailments present as mental health issues. And if it turns out you have a mental health issue, then the recommendation is medication, then take the medication. Now here, on average, a psychotropic medication, 1/3 of the people love it, 1/3 of the people it's okay, and the other third it's horrible. So if it's not working the way if your results are differing, there's a DNA cheek swab test. You do the Q-tip, send off your DNA, and they try to match your DNA with the psychotropics, the drugs that'll work best with your metabolism. It narrows it down to 2 or 3 because the doctor really only knows what the drug salesman told him. Your pharmacist is far wiser on that score. But yeah, do the DNA check. It's like a couple $100. A lot of insurance covers it, and it narrows down the list of possible. That way, you're not spending a lot of time going on. Doesn't work. taper off. Going on, doesn't work. I mean, that roller coaster is horrible.
Yeah, there's a great book too that I want to recommend to all my listeners. That if you're going through something like this, it's called Spark, and it talks about physical activity at elevated heart rate and what that does. It's equivalent to most antidepressants in the results. Study after study after study. If you'll do, I think it was 50 minutes of aerobic exercise at a high heart rate 4 times a week. It was equivalent to taking like Prozac or Zoloft or one of those things.
Well, and I recommend a holistic approach. I recommend that everybody have a self care plan. I have one. It's diet. I'm on the keto diet, but it's vegan.
Me
So
too.
keto vegan. Yeah, I've got vegan shakes, vegan bars. Um, diet exercise. Exercise 5 days a week. Um, good night's sleep. People discount the value of a good night's sleep. It's restorative. Meditation twice a day following a meal. It's a guided meditation called the cat napper. Takes you down, brings you back up. And medication, a little bit of medication. I take the minimum dose of Wellbutrin, which, by the way, about half the people who take Wellbutrin love it, and the other half are like, "Oh!" So I just happened to get lucky. The first thing they prescribed, and the doctor prescribed it because, believe it or not, at age 68, I do master's bodybuilding, and Wellbutrin doesn't make you gain weight. And he knew I was, bodybuilding, and so he just thought that'd be the one, and it worked as advertised.
Well, very cool. All right. So, um, what books, tapes have helped you along this path of learning?
Well, I was born with depression and thoughts of suicide because it runs in my family. It's called generational depression and suicide. So it's in my DNA. I wasn't even diagnosed. I've never seen a therapist or psychologist or psychiatrist. I didn't know what I had until I was writing that book with those two ladies, one being a psychologist, the other a therapist, and I'm describing my symptoms. And they go, "Well, Frank, would you like to know what you have?" Why, sure. You have major depressive disorder and chronic suicidal ideation.
Wow.
Well, and I've accepted that. I used to say I fight depression, but you can't fight it. That implies I could win. I can't win. So I live with it. I know what my cycle is: 3 days. First day I go down, second day flatten out, third day I come back up. I think of it as a wave. I just get on the wave and go with it. Um, and I realized at some point that my depression, thoughts, suicide are simply the flip side of my creativity, imagination, comic ability. Same brain, same wiring. I can teach you to write stand up and do stand up. I cannot teach you to process the incoming information the way my brain does and turns it right around to comedy in split second.
That's fun.
And I've had hecklers heckle me, and I've said something back to them, and people come up afterwards and go, "Man, how did you think that up?" I go, "I didn't think it up. I had no idea that was coming. I just opened my mouth and it came out. I don't know where it came from, but I didn't consciously. When you heard it, I heard it. And there's a reason that I can do that. I believe that's just the way my neurodiverse brain is wired.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Fascinating how the research that has come out on the brain and how everything. If you learn to be a neurosurgeon and you got out of school 15 years ago, you don't know anything like compared to what there is to know now and the plasticity of the brain. And it is just such a fascinating topic.
And there's a book called The Bipolar Advantage, and they believe Alexander Hamilton was bipolar, given the historical information on his life, his long days and nights riding and then crashing and burning. He was hypersexual. He had a number of the symptoms of somebody with bipolar disorder. And there are certain I did a whole TEDx talk called "Mental with Benefits: the evolutionary advantages of mental illness," because I kept bumping into people with a mental challenge who had some other amazing superpower.
But yeah, I totally agree. I'm one of those people with the superpowers from my childhood, two alcoholic parents, serious poverty, the whole bit, and it is a superpower. You are very aware of what everyone is thinking and doing, and it's pretty. I don't have any regrets, that's for sure. I wouldn't be who I am without those challenges.
Yes, and I imagine growing up in a house like that, you are hyper vigilant, which people think is a bad thing. But it is also a superpower that you notice things, hear things that other people just they may hear it, but they don't process it. You know, there was a guy did an experiment somewhere years ago. He was in a casino in Vegas, and this is long ago. And he said, "I want you to watch something." And he got a shotgun, unloaded, but he stood in the middle of the casino and went, "Chick, chick." And he said, "Now watch who turns around." And only a small percentage of the people went. So everybody else, they didn't process. They heard it, but they didn't. But there was a small percentage that did immediately. It got their attention. So it's. But if you grow up in a violent household where it's you never know who's gonna come home that night or what's gonna happen, you tend to be hyper aware, hyper
It's
vigilant.
ridiculous. You can't not hear things. I mean, I have to really, really work hard to be able to block other people out so I can focus because I'm listening for everything that's going on everywhere. And even when somebody is just droning on, I hear every word. I'm processing every word. I can't shut them out.
Yeah, I've been in a grocery store where in the aisle next to me there's a couple, and the words have gotten sharp, and as I'm walking down the aisle, I'm thinking that's not going to end well. But nobody else is really. I don't know if anybody else. Well, I wanted to be a police officer. It's on my bucket list, and during the recession, I actually applied with 12 different departments in the state of Washington, and a couple of the oral boards. They said to me, "What's the connection with comedy and cops?" I go, "We are paid observers. We notice things. People just they hear, they see, but they just walk by it. We are trained to we spot the anomaly, the light in the window in a warehouse at 3 in the morning, or the dog that didn't bark, or whatever it happens to be. I can't not hear or see those kind of things."
It's a curse and a blessing.
Yes, it is a curse and a blessing. Yes, but it's it works for funny as well. Like I thought everybody thought the same way I did till one day I decided to put it to the test. I thought, well, maybe I'm just getting to the punchline before everybody else. They're thinking it, but they just. So I'm in line at the grocery store, and I like to look at what people are buying. It's a guilty pleasure. And I noticed the guy in front of me is buying a pound of frozen shrimp and a quart of motor oil. So I saw the joke immediately because it was about the time that the BP oil well spill went off in the Gulf. I mean, 100,000 gallons a minute. And so I'm waiting for somebody else. We're all looking at the same stuff, and I'm waiting. So I thought, okay, well, I said to the guy, "Hey, man, interesting purchases. Shrimp and a quart of oil. Are you going to serve those Louisiana style?" The cashier bends over double. "You should be a comedian." Yeah, I get that a lot. I realized nobody else saw that, processed it that way. I saw the anomaly. Wait, motor oil and shrimp. Oh, there's the joke.
That is so cool. There was a comedian that was interviewed and talking about his first break, and he was a writer for. He just happened to get to be with someone that was writing for the Tonight Show, and they were talking about a football player he was in a sue where he was suing someone, and he had lost an eye, and um, and they were going around, and this kid who got his opportunity, he said something about he got this $5 million contract, but he ain't gonna see half of it.
Brilliant.
just
And,
it just came to him.
and by the way, I wrote jokes for the Tonight Show for 20 years.
Oh,
Uh,
that's pretty cool.
yeah, it was by fax, at a distance, contract labor, but still. And Jay Leno, I called his assistant Helga when we were getting ready to publish our fourth book. I said, "Would Jay think Jay would blurb the book cover?" "Oh yeah." So he blurbed the book cover.
Oh, cool.
Nice guy,
Very
really,
cool.
really nice guy. When I had my first open heart surgery, uh, I just gotten into a regular room out of cardiac ICU. Phone rings. First call, Leno. "Hey, heard you had heart surgery. Good thing you didn't have in LA. They'd take it out and leave it out."
Oh, how fun. You've made some really good friends.
Yeah, he's a great guy. He, he's yeah, He remembers where he came from. Remembers how hard it was at Foxworthy. Same thing. Foxworthy was coming to town to Raleigh when I was working the radio station. So I called his people. I said, "Love to open for Jeff." And Jeff said, "Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, you guys, I know you haven't been paying the opening act because those comics will do it for free. Get Frank the $500 we got in the budget for opening." He knew how much that meant to me at that level in my career. That $500 is a big deal. Make sure I got it. So,
That's cool. It is
yeah,
cool. And you
nice
have
guy.
to remember, you have to help up. Somebody helped him up.
Oh
Somebody
yeah,
gave him a hand up. You got to give everybody a hand. It's this that you got to do it. Okay. So, the last question,
yep.
as far as like think your way to an epic life, what ideas, what tips do you have for our listeners that will help them think their way to an epic life?
Pick a lane. No side hustles. Figure out what it is you do, what you're passionate about. Whether it's auto paint and body, or I've got a friend in town who owns 3 radio stations. That's all he does. Super successful. Have a friend in town who's an auto body shop. That's all he does. Super successful. That's what got me to speak on one thing because I was thinking, okay, now these guys are very different business thing. What is it? What do they have in common? They only do one thing and they do it better than everybody else. So I believe the riches are in the niches. Be the expert, the thought leader, the person in town who you do one thing and you do it better. And that's how you build your brand. So when somebody comes looking for auto body work or they want to advertise on a radio station, they don't think of anybody, just anybody. They want to work with those guys because they do it better than anyone else. And here's 3 questions I think they should ask themselves. It's all about individuation. One of my clients did a TEDx talk on individuation, that's sort of like a midlife crisis, individuation. And the 3 questions are this: ask yourself these questions. Are you living up to your expectations or someone else's? Are you a doctor because, you're a firstborn child and so are you living up to someone else's expectations? Are you the person you came here to be? And are you doing what you came here to do?
And you probably have to ask yourself those over and over and over until you get to the deep answers, huh?
And what I've discovered is, and I discovered this on a plane, is I'm sitting next to this woman, and I often ask people one particular question because I think that oftentimes they have not ever asked themselves. So, when we chat, I ask leading questions about them. And sometimes I do it the entire flight. And then they realize they haven't asked me anything. Well, people's favorite subject is themselves. So it's a great way to hold a conversation. So, well, Frank, what do you do? Well, I'm a comedian. Well, you don't, you're not that funny. I go, well, I'm off the clock. Get your checkbook out. Write me one. We'll yuck it up. And I'll always ask them, what do you do for a living? And the woman said, well, I set up exhibit hall booths at conventions. And I said, do you really like that? And anytime there's a pause before the answer, she can stop with the pause. Yeah. Tell me that's not qualified. So I go, look, what does your husband make a good living? Yes. So if you stop working today, would you guys survive? Yes. Okay. So what if I go away with a magic wand and you could do anything you wanted and money wasn't an issue, what would you do? And she told me, but I can't remember what she said. However, a year later, I got an email from her. She goes, Frank, I know you probably don't remember. I sat next to you on a plane. I'm the one that set up exhibit hall booths at conventions. You asked me what would I do if I'm doing it. I think she never asked herself. I was flying next to a pilot who was the number 1 pilot at United, and they were merging with another airline, and both airlines have a number 1 pilot, so one of them is not going to be working. So he was flying to Dallas to find out, is he going to be the number 1 pilot? The other guy. So I go, well, look, let's say the worst case. Something happens, and they pick him. And if I could wave a magic wand, and you could do anything you wanted, still make a living, what would it be? Sous chef. What? Yeah, that's right. I said, sous chef? He goes, oh man, I worked in college as a sous chef. I loved every minute of it.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's why I asked that question, because a lot of times people will not ask themselves, am I the person I came here to be? And am I doing, I mean, I know I am the person I came here to be, and I know I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. It's my purpose, my passion. I mean, it's work, but it's,
Doesn't feel like work, does it though? I mean, parts of it do.
oh yeah. I mean, the sales part of it is very difficult. I tell my students, my clients, coaching clients, look, you're not really a speaker who sells. You're a salesperson who speaks. No sales, no speaking. So if you don't like sales, you're in the wrong business.
Every business is marketing though.
Yeah.
If you don't have a customer, you don't have a job. So you have got to be a good marketer.
And I tell them, look, you have to control the things you can control. How many emails you send out, how many speaker proposals you fill out, how many podcasts you do to get your name out there and get the SEO. You have to control, because the other stuff you can't control. So that'd be my advice. Control the things you can control.
Pick a lane.
Anyway, that's and saving lives keeps me alive. I feel like George Bailey in It's a Wonderful Life. I've been shown what people's lives might be like if I weren't there simply to share and then have a conversation. And if I killed myself, in theory, I would take some of those people with me who never had a chance to hear me speak or share their story.
Or run into you in a grocery store or an Uber or wherever, because you sound to me to genuinely, and I've watched most of your TED Talks before we did this. You are genuinely here to serve. Like nobody puts out their cell phone number to the whole world like that. So
yeah, that's
yeah.
Well, it's what I came here to do, and I answer every cell smartphone call. I mean, that guy Spam Likely calls me all the time. But
and you answer him too?
I answer Spam Likely. I answer telemarketer. I answer because it might be someone that saw my phone number and they're not my contact list, and I don't want to miss someone like that just because the phone thinks it's scam likely.
Okay, so that is commitment on steroids, man. I bless you for that. That is amazing. So guys, if you've got someone that you are worried about, or if you're concerned, give Frank a call. He can head you in the right direction.
Here's the thing. Unlike a lot of people, I turn my smartphone off at night and I go to bed really early, but I also get up really early. I do that because my mama, back in the day, back when the phone plugged into the wall, remember that?
Yep.
At night, she'd always unplug it before we went to bed. So one day I asked her, why do you unplug the phone? She goes, honey, at 2 a.m, it's never good news. Get some sleep and then deal with it next day.
Wise woman.
Yeah. So I get up around 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning. So you can leave me a message. But rest assured, I'm calling back immediately. So if you don't want to hear from me immediately, turn the phone off. I'll leave you a message.
I love it. I love it. Frank, thank you so much, guys. Please get the free book, and then of course you're going to want the other ones. And please share this. Please, this podcast could seriously save someone's life. And just share it and let people know. If you're kind of shy and you don't want to actually call Frank, you can talk to him or I in the chat in YouTube. This is a podcast that's on audio stuff, but on YouTube too. So please feel free, put some chats. We'll talk back to you. We will definitely answer you. So thank you so much. We really appreciate your time.
No, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
You got it. See ya.